Grammy-winning producer Scott Jacoby has worked with the likes of John Legend and Vampire Weekend, and this month he welcomes us into his Eusonia studios in New York. Over the course of this video, Scott breaks down a 1960s-inspired production for music legend Ronnie Spector, explaining the period and modern production techniques employed. But first, we ask about some of the defining moments in this self-taught producer's career.
I've had a pretty weird entrance into the music industry. I know a lot of my friends and colleagues have been doing this since they're pretty young and knew that they wanted to do it. I was pretty much the opposite. Like, I played music all my life since I was about 10, been playing instruments and writing songs, but I didn't ever think that I could or would go into the music business or be, I didn't even know what a music producer was or any of these things. And so for my whole life I said, well, music's my favorite thing to do, but I'm never gonna, do this for a living. So, going through elementary school and middle school and high school and then university, I was like, okay, what do I want to do with my life? And after a long series of turns, I said I wanted to do medicine with my life. And so I went to medical school, which is not your typical sort of prerequisite for being a music producer, but I did, and that's what I wanted to do. And halfway through medical school, at the age of 27, I kind of, it's not like I had a epiphany as much as I just said, hey, maybe I can be doing music for a living, and that's definitely the thing that I love most. I love medicine too, but I'm writing all of these songs, and so I left and sort of like left without a net. So I did that, and it kind of motivates you in a way that's just like, okay, do or die, without a net kind of life. And gradually started getting my music career together. At first, I thought what I would do was be a recording artist, and that was probably not the best idea. I thought that because on all my favorite records, I'd read up on the back of a Stevie Wonder record that he, produced, performed, arranged, and composed by Stevie Wonder, and I figured that everyone did that because it happened to be Prince records were made the same way. And then someone explained to me, well, you don't actually have to do everything. And it was at that point I realized, oh, so you can pick and choose. I could just produce, or I could just write, or I could just mix. And said, well, that's what I want to do because that's what I like doing the most. And I'm not a very good singer, or I don't really like being on stage so much. So kind of found the ideal thing for me. And then, everyone's career is very different in this business, and it takes, it's never linear. You're kind of like go like this, and down and that. And I had kind of a series of sort of small breaks which turned into bigger things. And gradually I found myself on sort of better and better projects and working with great people. And having, started this at age 27, I had to kind of get a fast learning curve on. And I never had the benefit of working in a recording studio at all or with any kind of mentor. And I kind of learned all this on my own and sort of like just learned from twisting things. Part of me would have wanted to redo that and get a proper education in music, but probably I would have made the same decisions, and I just liked figuring stuff out on my own, and then just got to, continued working hard and working with different people, and then higher profile records, and got the opportunity to work on all sorts of things that I never thought that I would get to work on, and then it's smaller and smaller circles, and just led to getting some acclaim for what I do, or some chart positions or Grammy awards and this sort of thing. It just kind of it all happens. Probably the first major label job I had was an artist named Laura Isabor, who was signed to Atlantic Records. She was on she's from Ireland, and that just kind of like opened the world. I was like, oh, this is how real records are made, and there was an actual production budget, and we could work at Avatar Studios, and we could just do these things and travel around a little bit and say that, like, oh, lunch is on Atlantic Rest. I'd never experienced this before. So that was my kind of first bigger project. I worked with an artist named Maisha, and we got a Grammy nomination for the work that we had done together, which was particularly satisfying because we had started, she was one of the first artists that I ever worked with when I was starting this studio and just getting my act together, and we kind of like learned together how to make a record. And then fast forward a few years, you know, one of the tracks we did was nominated. That was a great moment for me. Working on the Vampire Weekend record was a real pleasure. Worked with Emily Lazar on that, and we mixed together for the single Unbelievers on their Modern Vampires of the City record, and that ended up winning for Best Alternative Album. It was Grammy for that, which was fantastic. And then I won a Grammy for a comedian named Louis Black, who is known from The Daily Show, originally with Jon Stewart, and he's an incredible comedian. And so it was bizarre to do a comedy record, but he did a live record at Carnegie Hall, and I engineered that, which was fun. So it's been a pretty diverse array of artists and experiences, but those are some Grammy moments.
Jumping from one genre to another doesn't seem to faze Scott at all, and one of his latest projects is certainly quite different. He sheds some more light on the project itself and what it was like working with Ronnie Spector.
I'm in an amazing position right now to be working with someone who's like a true legend and icon, and her name is Ronnie Spector, and Ronnie, I think, was first known as the lead singer of the Ronnettes, you know, famous 60s girl group, and she later married Phil Spector, and they separated in the 70s. It didn't go as planned. Ronnie went on to have a solo career and do a lot of amazing things, and here she is at age 72 and making a new record, and there's a Broadway show coming out about her, and I'm in the very lucky position of producing and mixing that record. It's a concept record of sorts, which is her most sort of important time in her life, and favorite time was the 60s, and particularly she was just incredibly influenced by the British invasion, and not just the Beatles, but so many different things that came. The whole record is her favorite cover tunes of British artists from that period. So we're doing a lot of interesting stuff and not obvious choices too. We're doing like songs that are just some are less known, obscure tunes. We're doing a Keith Richards pen tune that the Stone released called "I'd Much Rather Be with the Boys," which we're doing as "I'd Much Rather Be with the Girls," and we're doing a song called "Because" by Jerry and the Pacemakers, and it's really it's an incredible thing to work with Ronnie, just given her history, what she's been through as a human being. She's had a lot of difficult times, and she's overcome all this. And in our first vocal tracking session, you know, I had no idea how this would go or what it would be like. We had already met, but I didn't, you know, once you start cutting vocals with someone, you really get to know them and see how it is. And it was one of the most powerful experiences of my career, because we were doing the Bee Gees song, "How Can You Mend a Broken Heart," that Al Green had famously covered. And, you know, hearing Ronnie Spector sing the lyrics of that song, and she certainly had a broken heart and a lot of things, and gotten through so much adversity in her life, singing that, and she was, you know, crying a bit while she was singing. It was an extremely powerful thing, and I think you can kind of hear that in the record. What we are going for is something that has a vintage character, but not looking to kind of like recreate verbatim, you know, everything that was from that period of time, you know. So it's definitely, it evokes the 60s and the period, and there's a lot of things that are truly accurate to that time period in terms of the instruments and in terms of recording techniques and microphones and things like that. But it's also laced with not just samples and sort of instruments, but more like techniques of today that kind of give the thing, it's like, well, this kind of sounds 60s, but it doesn't. That was the vibe that I wanted to go for. I wanted people to be undeniably 60s evocative, but kind of like feel, you know, feel new or feel fresh in a way.
We asked Scott to talk us through some of the techniques used on the track we're dissecting.
I mean, for the song "Because," it's a perfect example of sort of melding the modern production techniques with 60s aesthetic and 60s all sorts of flavorings from there. And so you know, for the drum track in that, for example, we used a lot of ambient sounds, and the stomps and claps are a big part of this record. And you know, there's tremendous samples that exist of that stuff, but I wanted very original sounds, and so we made our own stomps and claps samples. And my studio happens to be in a building that's from 1896 in the middle of downtown Manhattan, and there's some really interesting hallways in here, and it's mostly wood. And so we brought some old microphones and some new microphones into parts of this building, and I just had a group of people come out there and sort of stomp on the floor and clap, and microphones in different areas of the building would catch the reflections of that, and then put together these sounds that then kind of like, bounce them down and just have this ability to just go boom, clap, clap, boom, clap. And that's kind of pulsing through the whole thing. On top of that, I might put some live drums, live cymbals, sort of break it down, but really looked to kind of like have these ambient sounds as this breathing, pulsing thing, and that's what we used in the song. So the way I generally work and incorporate all of this analog stuff is that once we're in the box in Pro Tools and I'm working with that and getting to a mix phase, I'll use hardware inserts to get out of Pro Tools and then back in. I generally have things that I like. Oh, this is something I've gotten to like on bass, a certain EQ and compression, and then this is a lead vocal chain. Often I switch them, but usually I kind of like feel that things are working in a certain way, and I keep them. So on the drums here, just to go through really quickly, this song, the Ronnie Spector Because, is a mixture on the drum level of program sounds and live stuff too. So drums here, this is a mixture of live samples and samples that I've made myself or collected or this and that, and kind of give that the impact. And that's mixed with live drums that I recorded right here in our lounge in not a particularly fancy setup. It's just like a room that happens to have a wood floor. It's about 15 feet, sort of square with an 11-foot ceiling. It's not ideal, but I wanted to get kind of like crappy, roomy drum sound, and so I used 4 mics on the kit, some ribbon mics and some Omni things, and so that's a live thing. So that's me playing. That then is just kind of like running as a loop with the reinforced other sounds. And there's this clap loop that gives a thing that runs through most of the track, and some tambourine and samples. So a little bit reminiscent of Phil Spector stuff, but with a modern touch. And these are all just tom samples to give it that. Let me put those in for a second. Here it comes. Oh, there he is. There's the toms. And then the rest of the drum track is right here. Let's get all of this in. And there's your full drum track. And then I do parallel compression up here. The main drums are coming in right here. I have a Massey limiter on the whole drum track, just touching it, void overs. And then the whole thing's running through SSL master bus compressor, and I kind of use that as a drums crushed situation. And then it's parallel. I've got these 2 of these things in here, so it's a nice combo. This gives a lot of the ambience and the roominess and the reflections of the thing, and then you have the impact from the other one. So going down bass, it's a similar scenario. We've got a DI bass, which sounds a little bit like this. Okay, and then I've got an amp sound, which sounds a little bit like this. So the 2 of those sounds in phase are giving us the main bass sound, which is going through 2, that bass is multed. We have 1 coming in, going through a chain. It's going through the Manley ELOP and the curve bender, Chandler curve bender, and this Neve 542 tape module. Without it, it sounds like this. So in 1 button, I'm just kind of doing that whole chain out of the box, coming back in. And the bass is also multed from my little crunch bass track, which is, again, going out of the box. It's going through the Electronaut, which is a preamp, but I use it as a preamp, and it can be super clean, but it can also be this warm tape tube saturation kind of thing. So you can see on the right side there, the meter on that, it's hitting those tubes hard, and it's also going through that crappy Sun EQ, which kind of gives it, I call it my Black Keys vocal sound, really crunchy, great thing. Yeah, on this track I happen to be using on bass, and there's our two bass things. Okay, piano, similar type of arrangement. We used a ribbon mic, 1950s RCA 44, and a pair of 414s right outside the upright out here, and just very roomy, kind of nice piano sound. A little bit of EQ, and the Massey EQ is my favorite thing. Kind of gives it a little punch in the mid-range, and whatever's going on here, a little bit of compression. Same thing, Farfisa organ, sort of multiple techniques. We've got our Farfisa DI, this is original Farfisa. And then we've got, I amped it at the same time. So we've got 57 and a Royer 121. So it gives it that crunchiness and the spring reverb and stuff like that, along with the DI. It's a nice full sound. And then just a Manley tape head, which is my favorite thing. It can get rid of all the brittleness and makes everything thicker. So that's the type of stuff. Lead vocal, Ronnie's lead vocal on this. I use a similar technique. If we solo this for a second.
It's wrong to
that's the lead vocal here. Okay, and then we have a multed vocal, which is going through the other side of the Electronaut M63. So, and that's I think I have that set up so that the slap is on 100. Oh no, that one's on 50%. But so we're getting distorted signal hitting along with the dry one, as well as on a slap of like 130 milliseconds. So the two of those, and then heavily EQ'd, sucking out a lot of lows and boosting mids and getting rid of S's on the top. So that's kind of our vocal sound for this song. Okay, if I get rid of the mult, it's gonna get rid of that springy sound and that slap, and that's just the slap. And then the last thing on this is just the background vocals. We decided to go super realistic 60s setup and just did two girls singing at the same time, one mic, two girls, one mic, and the ribbon mics are figure 8 pattern. So one's on either side of the 44, and they're just going through, and I collected the room. So this is
I love you because I love you.
And on the reverb on that, I think I'm just doing, it says Hall, but this is EMT plate on Altiverb plugin. And that's running also through hardware. It's going through Avalon 747. And then the whole mix is going up into my master chain, which is a number of different boxes, but it includes the Shadow Hills and the Neve, the Portico, Master Bus Compressor, Thermionic Culture, Phoenix, the Pultex, the Retro 2A3, which is amazing, and then I use a Crane Song head converter for the master chain, and then a little bit of limiting at the end, and try not to print it too hot. But that's the whole thing. When I get to a point where I feel everything's sounding in place and balanced, and I'm usually sort of 80% through, I said, let's throw the master chain on, and then I'll put it on and just get that boost there at the end. Not for mastering, this is just, it's a mix bus chain. This song doesn't have any fade outs, but to prevent that thing when you're fading out, the post-fader, pre-fader thing, so, I want the compression to still happen as it's fading out, so I don't have to do any different routing than this. So I just have these hardware inserts on the master, and you can hear, here's without the master chain stuff. And then here's with it.
I don't think of you.
So there's, you can there's a number of different things going on, but a little bit of spatial stuff, mostly in the high end, and there's some compression at different stages. All the different boxes for compression, the Shadow Hills and the Phoenix. And I don't have the Neve really doing any compression, but they're all just doing little bits. Everything's little bits, and the Shadow Hills is actually, it's going through two compressors, in series. That's what's nice too about this thing. It's got the switchable output transformer matrix. So I generally keep it on one of them, but it's really nice for different things to have the ability to have it sound more like Neve or more like API or that sort of thing. But what I'm looking for each one to do, like certain ones are more gluing, I'd say, and certain ones are to create a little bit more of a little bit of pulsing in the track. I usually don't do too much of that, but I view that this is a variable mu compressor, the thermionic, and I think of that more as my glue compressor. It kind of makes everything sound better. And then the optical part of the Shadow Hills is really that it hits that the lightest typically, but just there's a little bit of portions are getting loud and it's smooth. And then the last thing it hits is the discrete section, so similar to SSL style compression on that, where sometimes if the track's bumping, it's going to hit that. And I have generally the attack set pretty slow. I want to, in a lot of the music that I do, kind of keep the transients and the force of it, and the attack. So the attack's slower, and the release is not all the time, but often a little bit faster, and kind of get a nice breath from it. But it's not. I'm never anywhere doing more than a maximum of 1 or 2 dB compression at any stage. So it's all pretty light.
If you like this video, why not subscribe to the Sound on Sound YouTube channel for all our latest video content. Also, if you want to read the magazine, you can pick up a copy in your local newsagent. Download the tablet edition or find us online at soundonsound.com. Thanks for watching.